OTS's goal is to turn on impressionable young grad students to the tropics, and it worked. I was the first graduate student from North Carolina State University to take an OTS course. The curious thing about it is, though, that our course coordinator decided that it was too difficult to get to La Selva, so he jettisoned that part of the course, and we stayed at Las Cruces an extra week instead of going to La Selva. So it wasn't until a year later, when I came back down to do some research, that I got to La Selva. I grew up on a farm, loved trees, and enjoyed being in a forest, and I, for some reason, was curious about tropical rainforest, or the wetter forest, rather than the dry forest of Guanacaste. So, yeah, and I got to La Selva for the first time in September 1968 in a non-credit course taught by Dr. Holdridge in tropical dendrology, where I met Jack Ewell and other luminaries of OTS fame. And we were at La Selva for 2 weeks studying trees. Loved it. But I actually switched universities to the University of Washington in order to do my doctoral research at La Selva. And so it was wonderful to be at La Selva, and I absolutely loved it, and decided, it took me a while to figure out what research project I was going to do, but finally, and interestingly enough, because we were just talking with Larry Gilbert, and he took an advanced ecology course, they kicked out the researchers from La Selva, so I had to go somewhere. And the OTS Fundamentals course invited me to go to the Osa Peninsula. And that's what opened my eyes about La Selva, was seeing it from afar, trying to figure out, okay, you've got a dominant tree species at La Selva, which is unusual in tropical rainforests. Figure out why that tree is so successful. I came up with an intrinsic rate of increase of the population, and it turned out that that was the first legitimate study or demographic study of trees anywhere in the world. There had been a couple publications, but they weren't very valid on that. So I worked it out for Penaclethra macroloba. As part of the first NSF grant to OTS, the University of Washington Forestry Group got money to set up permanent inventory plots at La Selva and in Guanacaste as well. So we did a couple out there. I was responsible for identifying all the trees on those plots, 6,000 trees on about 12 hectares of, so that's almost 30 acres of permanent inventory plots. So I learned the trees finally at La Selva. Everyone feared the fertilants, but I saw more bushmaster snakes because I worked in primary forest or old growth forests rather than in the second growth area. So I saw occasional fertilances, but I saw many more bushmasters in the old growth forests of La Selva. So that was interesting. I also got stung a few times by the bullet ants, and each one was worse than the preceding ones. Those I didn't like. We had a team, some local people. We had foresters that had come out of some of the universities here in Costa Rica. But a lot of it was done by grad students coming in from the U.S. I think one of the more significant things that I did was lobby and work with Mario Bosa, who was then very involved with the National Park System of Costa Rica, to expand Braulio Carrillo National Park to La Selva. And we did that very successfully, connecting La Selva. That was in the early 80s that we did that, and it came about in part because I was the local scientific coordinator for Operation Raleigh, and we opened up a transect trail from La Selva to the top of Volcan Barva, and that's still being used by the TEAM project, among others. So I think that was hugely significant for La Selva to connect it to Braulio Carrillo National Park. I worked closely with Don Stone, the longtime executive director of OTS through the 70s and 80s. And Don asked me to collaborate with him on putting together one of the first proposals that went into NSF for La Selva improvements, facilities improvements. And as part of that, we got to host Bill Silvers from NSF, and Don asked me to show him around La Selva. And we purposely went to the muddiest places, the most difficult crossings and so forth, because one of the things that we wanted to do was improve the trails. at La Selva. And I think that's one of the real strengths of La Selva, that it has such excellent infrastructure.
Yes.
And we got funding. And the stone bridge was built in 1982.
Okay.
Yeah, which was another whole happening of opening up the east bank of La Selva, which has been a godsend. Well, first of all, it was a horrible drive, 5 hours from San Jose to Puerto Viejo. I remember bringing my father down and talking about the road, and he said, "What road? That's like driving on a riverbed." Yeah. So, and then we got to Puerto Viejo, and you had to meet the boatman who made 3 trips a day from his place upriver from what's now the river station down to a ford crossing the Rio Sarapiquí. And it was about a half-hour boat ride, motorized boat ride up to the station. And then you had to haul everything up about 100 steps to get to the river station, which was... The other thing that always seemed to happen is, even in the dry season, it would rain at 11:30 to 12, exactly when you're in the boat going up to the river station. So it was quite an odyssey in that era.
And the boatman?
Rafael Chaveri, yeah, wonderful guy. He was actually my tree instructor, because he knew the common names of trees, and so he was a great teacher to me. I really enjoyed getting to know him and working with him. We did some great treks into the back of the property. I remember he showed me my first spider monkeys, and at that time there was a lot of hunting pressure behind La Selva, so monkeys and game animals were really skittish. Very, very rare did you see them. How different it is now when you see the great curassow walking around the clearing, peccaries everywhere, big cats, very nice, very successful. After doing my doctoral research on Penaclethra, I got funding through Gordon Oriens to study gaps in tropical forests, which you know well.
Which I know well.
Well, and that was, we got refunded from NSF, so I put in a couple years of a postdoc with Gordon Oriens, and I would go in and meet with Dr. Holdridge periodically, because he was the most knowledgeable person about tree identifications there, and I would talk to him about the future, and I was beginning to have doubts because of rampant deforestation, the huge unanswered questions about tropical rainforests. I wasn't sure I wanted to do it from a U.S. academic institution, and I broached this to Dr. Holdridge, and we were talking about the future and opportunities and so forth, and he said to me, "Here, you want to go to Peru?" And I read this cable from FAO and asking him to go to Peru and teach dendrology, the field identification of trees. And he had commitments, he couldn't do it, but he asked me if I would be interested to do it. And I said, "You think I can do this? I've never been in Peru." He said, "Yeah, you can do it," you know, teaching his system of dendrology. And so I did it, and that led to my affiliation with the Tropical Science Center for about 15 years of active participation. Dr. Holdridge was he bought La Selva, called it Finca La Selva in 1953, and sold it to OTS in 1968 for the launch of the Comparative Ecosystem research project. That's how I got involved with that. But yes, he talked a lot about the history of La Selva, about tree species, about land use pressures in that area. A pretty visionary guy. He wanted to make it a working forest, so on the upper terrace he planted Peibaya. He tried rubber, which mostly failed, and so forth. But the cacao and the Peibaya seemed to work. And there was a lemon grove there as well, where the new laboratories are now, so it's changed phenomenally. But he had a vision for it, and at least he protected the old growth forest in the back of La Selva, so I think that's valuable. When I learned that Don Stone was retiring as executive director of OTS, I thought how interesting it might be to try to succeed him. And fortunately, as you know, I was a successful candidate and spent 7 years at the helm of OTS. And I felt that I really owed so much to OTS, because OTS really gave me a career, led me into research and understanding of tropical forests. You know, I think we're pretty successful in growing OTS, we made good progress building the first phase of the endowment there. We expanded the membership. I think we added up to about 65 member institutions from 9 countries on 4 continents, is I think what I used to say on that. And I think that was a really great part of it. We were able to expand the educational program to South Africa, for example, which is an ongoing success, is my understanding. To leave OTS was, I think, the most difficult decision I've ever made, but I'm glad I made it, and I've really had fun running the World Forestry Center.